Amazon Prime's The Wheel of Time. Who is this for? What is the demographic? And why? I feel as though I have to lay my credentials out beforehand so the internet doesn't tell me I'm a fake fan. Currently, I am on book 5 of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. I have read every Game of Thrones novel. I've seen every episode of the show twice. I've rewatched every Lord of the Rings movie dozens of times, including the Hobbit trilogy. High fantasy is just one of my many things. For those who didn't know, Amazon Prime wanted to attempt to make a Game of Thrones competitor using Robert Jordan's 15-book franchise, The Wheel of Time. That is almost triple the amount of source material Game of Thrones had, and even they fucked up the show in its Twilight seasons. Why, one might ask? Well, because they rushed the final 2 seasons just to get the show off of their plate so Benioff and Weiss could go on to scare the entire Star Wars fan base by stating they would pick up a post-Skywalker era Star Wars story. Thankfully, they backed out due to having a busy schedule, ruining other franchises. But I digress. Amazon's The Wheel of Time was supposed to be the show that filled in the massive high fantasy gap Game of Thrones left in its pitiful departure. The scene was set, there was no competition in the market, the cast was already established, shooting had already begun, and of course things got sidetracked by a certain global issue that took precedent. Fear not, shooting resumed, a release date was announced. My girlfriend and I were cruising through the books as I did with Game of Thrones, just trying to stay a few steps ahead of the show so I had a good reference point while watching. I made it all the way to book 5, my girlfriend being the dork that she is, listened to 14 audiobooks in a matter of months, and is currently starting the final book in the franchise. We were ready. She had high expectations, not seeing the downfall HBO handed us, and mine were pretty middled, thinking Amazon Prime wouldn't dump the same amount of money HBO did into Game of Thrones. Regardless, I told myself, even if it's low quality, I want to see the story play out visually in front of my own eyes, and then we binged the first 3 episodes when they aired. Before I fall into the rabbit hole of everything wrong with The Wheel of Time, I might as well highlight some of the positives. The majority of the casting I thought was well put together. Just about every Aes Sedai was cast well, with Rosamund Pike and Josh Stradowski being the standouts in Moiraine and Rand. Some of the set pieces were also interesting, with some of the scenes looking well shot and edited. I thought the way that they depicted channeling was relatively interesting, even with it being as minimal as it was. And that's kind of all I got. I genuinely couldn't find much more to enjoy from this show of a book franchise I am now 5,000 pages deep into. So, what's wrong with the show? Literally everything else. The rest of the cast is fine, if not serviceable. Any scene taking place outside of the woods or a small village kind of just looks awful. They spend maybe 15 minutes in Shadar Logoth, which is supposed to be this massive, cursed, abandoned city, and they show 3 alleyways that all look the same and they all looked like moved set pieces. It is glaring how little effort got put into the locations, with less screen time, even though they were major locations in the books. The chemistry between the characters seems way off. Relationships are forced where they weren't before. Characters had completely made up wives that never existed. There was no time put into establishing the friendships between the 5 major characters from the 2 rivers. It was all just rushed. All they wanted to do was get to the Trollocs invading the 2 rivers and attempt to show off the climactic battle scene that was all downgraded by low practical effects and wonky CGI. There are so many key plot points just completely missed or leaped straight over in an effort to maximize the amount of source material used in one season. Amazon's goal was unfortunately to force 3 entire books into one singular season, and the results are awful. Everything is rushed, every major location, interaction, character development point, introduction of new characters, plot points, etc. were all rushed. They decided to create brand new characters nobody cared about and dedicate the majority of an episode to them. For what purpose? I could not tell you. Instead of wasting an entire episode on one single no-name character, why not spend that time world building, character developing? Some of these characters were left completely out entirely. I won't go into spoilers, but there are several major characters that are introduced in the first 3 books that just don't show up. There's so many times where 2 or 3 of the characters are supposed to split apart in order to, develop them individually or in a smaller fragmented group. That never seems to happen. They split up for an episode, then reunite in locations they don't in the books, completely overlooking all of the important facets of growing as mainstays in the franchise. There is no attachment to any of these characters because the only role they play is to be on screen as a crammed plot is violently flashed out in front of us. I honestly do not know who this show was made for. Fans of the books will watch it and question every action or misaction that takes place. Every time a plot point was overstepped, we had to pause the show and question, why the fuck didn't they do this? Or why is this character here? They're supposed to be on the other side of the continent training with these other characters that never got introduced. Then they introduce a fan favorite character and all I can do is shake my stupid bald fucking head and say, what the fuck did they do to my boy Loial? Where is Elaine? Why did only Rand and Moraine go into the Eye of the World? Where is Sameshta? What is even fucking happening? I sat there after the season 1 finale and tried my absolute hardest to try and view what the fuck I just watched from the eyes of someone who has never read any of the books. And all I can imagine is how absolutely mind warp fucked they'd be trying to wrap their heads around that season. Everything is rushed, nothing is explained, none of the characters matter because they aren't fleshed out in any way. There are zero attachments from the viewer to the characters, the plot, or the world because nothing is explored beyond surface level. I would not be surprised to see a dip in viewership come season 2 because they did such an awful job at pulling any interest into a new audience and practically screamed at the already existing fan base from the books. I have no choice but to watch season 2 because my girlfriend's going to make me, but season 1 of Amazon Prime's The Wheel of Time gets 2 completely missing characters out of 5.